Are you ready for the shocking truth about how ancient builders erected unique structures to protect themselves from merciless ice storms? Huge masses of jagged snow fell endlessly onto the boundless plains, transforming the surrounding landscape into an impassable white desert where the slightest error in a house's structural calculations could prove fatal. In these extreme conditions, the traditional Earthen Hogan became the only reliable shelter capable of retaining internal heat thanks to its incredibly ingenious, multi-layered architecture. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how the clever distribution of heat flows inside the circular structure allowed for maintaining a comfortable temperature without the use of complex heating systems. What I am about to show you is banned in 12 countries, even though it involves long-forgotten methods of constructing incredibly sturdy structures from ordinary natural materials. Building a winter Hogan always began with the careful selection of the ideal site, where the soil was dense enough to support massive foundation posts. A deep foundation was not required. Instead, the surface was carefully leveled and compacted with heavy stones until it was as smooth and hard as stone. It was this initial preparation of the earthen floor that ensured the future structure's maximum stability, even against the strongest gusts of the icy winter wind. The foundation of the entire complex structure was formed by 3 or 4 enormous mountain juniper logs, which created a high-strength central support frame. These main posts were cut using the simplest stone axes and carefully stripped of even the slightest traces of bark using flint scrapers. The upper ends of these load-bearing supports had natural forks, which allowed the logs to be securely interlocked without the use of wooden pegs or ropes. This method of fastening gave the structure remarkable flexibility, allowing the building to spring slightly under the immense weight of snow caps without breaking. The Hogan's roof had a single, vital square opening right in the center, which served as the sole channel for thick smoke to escape from the hearth. The edges of this opening were reinforced with thick, flat stones that protected the wooden elements from accidental fire in high temperatures. The size of the chimney was calculated with incredible precision to ensure perfect draft without letting all the accumulated heat escape. During the fiercest blizzards, this opening could be partially covered with flat boards, leaving only a narrow slit for ventilation. The process of plastering the exterior walls was a massive collective effort that required mixing a huge amount of red clay with river sand and water. This wet mixture was applied to the wooden frame in a thick, even layer using wooden trowels and carefully smoothed by hand. The layer had to be thick enough to provide maximum thermal insulation from the harsh external environment for many months. As it dried under the rays of the autumn sun, the earthen shell acquired the strength of fired ceramics and became completely monolithic. During freezing, this outer clay layer did not crack thanks to the correct ratio of sand to clay in the original mortar. Any micro cracks that appeared after strong winds were immediately filled with fresh mortar, which was always kept in small quantities indoors. The dome's shape caused cold air currents to flow smoothly around the structure without creating strong pressure on flat surfaces, which simply did not exist here. The aerodynamics of this earthen dwelling surpassed many modern rectangular buildings, which bear the full brunt of the elements. Centuries of construction experience were passed down exclusively by word of mouth, from experienced masters to the younger generation of builders. Precise adherence to the proportions and angles of the support posts ensured that the house would last for decades, requiring only cosmetic repairs to the facade. The exterior of the Hogan blended perfectly into the surrounding landscape, making it virtually invisible among the red rocks and sandy hills. This architectural camouflage was the highest expression of respect for the environment and the laws of harmony with nature. A layer of red clay was applied in a thick, even coat, starting from the very base of the walls and extending to the edges of the central smoke vent on the roof. This earthen plaster dried under the rays of the autumn sun, transforming into an impenetrable shell that completely blocked the entry of cold air into the interior. Over time, this material acquired the properties of ceramics, becoming completely impervious to torrential rains and heavy snowfall. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the reliability of such earthen structures, so be sure to share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to our channel. I will reveal the best-kept secret of survival in conditions of extremely low temperatures in the midst of a boundless and merciless snowy desert. The central element of any traditional Hogan has always been the hearth, which was located strictly in the center of a perfectly circular earthen dwelling. This spot was chosen with mathematical precision so that the radiant heat from the smoldering coals would be evenly distributed in all directions, reaching the farthest corners of the dwelling. The smoke rose smoothly upward toward a special square opening in the roof, creating a constant and safe draft of fresh air. The main fuel for the hearth was thick, dry branches of pine and juniper, which were harvested in vast quantities long before the first cold snap. These types of wood burned slowly and evenly, giving off a tremendous amount of heat and leaving behind dense, hot embers. The harvested firewood was neatly stacked along the interior walls of the structure, creating an additional insulating layer between the cold earthen shell and the living space. Careful sorting of the wood allowed thin branches to be used for quick kindling, while massive logs were used to maintain heat at night. Air currents inside the round Hogan circulated according to specific laws of physics that the builders understood on an intuitive level. Cold air seeping through the cracks around the doorway immediately rushed toward the central fire, heated up, and rose upward. Warm air masses glided along the smooth slopes of the earthen dome, gradually descending along the walls and warming the entire interior. This continuous convection prevented the formation of stagnant cold zones, transforming the entire house into a single, coordinated thermal mechanism. The lighting of the interior during long winter evenings depended entirely on the intensity of the central hearth. Small torches made of resinous pine were stuck into the earthen floor at a specific angle, providing bright light for fine handwork. This light reflected off the polished wooden supports and the smooth surfaces of the clay pottery, creating a surprisingly cozy atmosphere. Shadows danced on the curved walls, transforming everyday life into an endless play of warm hues and mysterious shapes. Getting ready for bed was a true ritual for preserving the thermal energy generated during the day. Thick woven blankets were layered to form something resembling modern sleeping bags with perfect thermal insulation. Hot stones, preheated in the ashes, were wrapped in pieces of cloth and placed at the foot of the bed for quick warming. These simple tricks allowed for a comfortable sleep even when a fierce wind raged outside, trying to tear off the earthen roof. Every morning began with a thorough inspection of the interior walls for frost, which could indicate dangerous microcracks in the clay shell. Any suspicious spot was immediately smoothed over with a warm mixture of clay and ash, which was always kept in a small pot right by the fire. This constant maintenance ensured that the thermal barrier would remain completely airtight until spring. Attention to the smallest details was the key to survival in this harsh climate. The layer of heated sand acted as a massive natural battery, slowly releasing its stored heat throughout the long hours of complete darkness. Even when the last embers in the central hearth had completely died out, the temperature inside the earthen dome remained surprisingly stable and comfortable for sleeping. Thick woven rugs hung along the walls created an additional air pocket, completely eliminating any treacherous drafts near the floor. How difficult do you think it was to maintain such an ideal temperature throughout the winter? And would you like to learn about the secrets of creating these unique fabrics in the next chapter? What you have never seen before is hidden in the incredibly complex geometry of the ancient looms set up inside winter shelters. The vertical loom consisted of two massive side supports and sturdy crossbars, which were securely fastened between the earthen floor and the log ceiling of the Hogan. The immense tension of the warp threads required perfect stability of the entire wooden structure, so the wedges were driven in with maximum force using heavy stone hammers. Sitting on a thick woven mat, the weaver spent long winter hours engaged in monotonous but incredibly precise work that demanded the utmost concentration. The fine threads made from plant fibers were first boiled in large clay pots, with the addition of various shrub roots to give them the desired texture. This process made the plant yarn incredibly durable, capable of withstanding years of constant mechanical friction and washing. The yarn wound into tight balls was arranged in strict color order in woven baskets standing to the weaver's left. Preparing all the materials for work took no less time than the actual process of creating the complex geometric pattern on the loom. The warp of the future fabric was stretched with mathematical precision, forming a perfectly even grid of parallel, taut strings. The master used a long, flat wooden slat, carved from hard wood to separate the warped threads and create the necessary spacing. With a deft movement of the hand, a small shuttle carrying colored thread was passed through this gap, forming the first row of the future masterpiece. This row was then firmly beaten down using a special wooden comb with fine teeth carved from juniper branches. The width of the fabric being woven was limited by the physical reach of the master's arms as he sat before the loom's vertical frame. Creating large carpets required incredible physical endurance, as the process demanded constant tension in the back and shoulder muscles. Fine dust from the plant fibers swirled in the rays of light streaming through the door cracks, settling on the clay floor. To protect his airways, the master often tied a thin piece of cloth over his face as he continued his monotonous and painstaking work. Each element of the pattern had its own strict geometric meaning, depicting natural phenomena such as lightning, mountains, and rain clouds. The symmetry of the ornament was checked by eye, yet it achieved a striking precision rivaling modern computer calculations. The weaving in of an additional thread of a different color was so skillful that it was absolutely impossible to find the joining points on the finished product. The front and back sides of the carpet turned out to be absolutely identical, which attested to the highest level of craftsmanship. As the carpet grew upward, the completed section was wound onto the lower crossbar of the loom, freeing up space for new work. This allowed for the creation of pieces whose length significantly exceeded the height of the earthen dwelling itself. The tension of the warp was constantly adjusted using wooden pegs on the sides to ensure the edges of the fabric remained perfectly straight and did not pull toward the center. This technical skill required years of experience and a subtle, intuitive understanding of how plant fibers behave as humidity changes. Each finished rug was not merely a household item, but a true map of the universe, encoded in abstract geometric lines. The use of natural plant dyes made it possible to create surprisingly durable and deep shades of red, yellow, and black that did not fade for decades. The process of removing the finished fabric from the massive loom was always accompanied by a deep sense of satisfaction from the massive work accomplished. If you enjoyed this detailed dive into the amazing world of ancient crafts, be sure to like this video. What if everything you were taught about ancient methods of preserving plant-based food is merely a pale shadow of the real technologies? The foundation of the winter diet consisted of carefully dried corn of various varieties, which was stored in special deep pits, reliably protected from freezing. The hard kernels of blue churrak, yellow, and white corn were ground daily into the finest flour on a massive stone matat using a smooth, handheld monostone. This physically demanding labor began long before dawn, filling the quiet space of the Hogan with the rhythmic grinding of stone against stone. The process of grinding corn was an art requiring immense physical strength and the correct technique for distributing body weight. The kernels were first coarsely crushed and then ground several times until they became a fine powder, which was collected in woven flat baskets. To give the flour special properties and make it more digestible, carefully sifted ash from burnt juniper twigs was added to it. This alkaline additive completely altered the chemical composition of the corn, releasing the nutrients necessary to maintain health during the cold season. Dried bean pods, harvested back in the fall, were first soaked in warm water overnight to restore their original softness. In the morning, the swollen beans were placed in a heavy, thick-walled clay pot and set to simmer in the hot ashes at the edge of the hearth. Slow cooking over smoldering coals lasted several hours, transforming the hard beans into a thick and incredibly nutritious stew. A wooden lid sealed the pot tightly, preventing steam and precious aromas from escaping through the smoke vent in the roof. The corn flatbreads were baked directly on the smooth surface of a hot, flat stone, set over a layer of hot coals. A thin layer of liquid batter made from blue corn flour and water was poured onto the hot surface, instantly setting at the edges. With a deft movement of a wooden spatula, the flatbread was flipped over, developing a light golden crust in just a few seconds. As freshly baked flatbreads were eaten immediately, burning the fingers and filling the room with the delightful aroma of baked grain. Storing water in winter was a separate and difficult task, as liquid water froze instantly at the entrance to the Hogan. Large clay jugs for storing drinking water were always placed in the warmest part of the dwelling, at a safe distance from open flames. If water supplies ran low, they had to melt clean snow in clay pots, which required a huge amount of precious firewood. Snowmelt had a bland taste, so dried shrub leaves were often added to give it a light herbal aroma. The meal took place in absolute silence, where each participant focused on the food and expressed silent gratitude for the meal. All the clay dishes were thoroughly cleaned after the meal using bundles of dry grass and sand, as water had to be conserved. The polished wooden bowls were wiped dry and stacked inside one another, returning to their place against the south wall of the Hogan. This strict order ensured that all kitchenware was clean and ready for the next process of preparing this vital food. Cooking thick corn porridge with the addition of healing shrub ash required constant stirring with a special wooden paddle in a clay pot. Yellow squash, cut into long spiral strips and dried in the autumn sun, was added to the boiling water to give the dish natural sweetness and thickness. Stalks of pine nuts gathered in the mountain forests served as an indispensable source of fats and calories needed to maintain energy during the cold season. Could you survive on a strictly plant-based diet throughout the long, harsh winter? And are you interested in learning in the next chapter how stone tools were made? The long winter days provided the perfect opportunity for the careful crafting and repair of vital stone and wooden tools. To create sharp scrapers and knives, select pieces of flint and obsidian were used, which were carefully worked using the flaking technique. The craftsman used a special tool made of hardwood to apply precise pressure to the edge of the stone, separating thin and incredibly sharp flakes. The floor of the Hogan around the work area was covered with a thick cloth so that no sharp shards would get lost in the soft earthen floor. The stone blade was attached to the wooden handle using thin and incredibly strong fibers from wild yucca. These fibers were first soaked in water, then tightly wrapped around the junction of the stone and wood. As they dried in the air, the fibers shrank dramatically, providing an iron grip that surpassed the strength of many modern adhesives. The attachment point was generously coated with thick, heated coniferous resin, which served as additional reinforcement and protection against moisture. Repairing the heavy stone matats on which corn was ground daily was also part of the list of mandatory winter tasks. Over time, the smooth working surface of this massive basalt stone became too polished, and the kernels began to slide across it. To restore the necessary roughness, the craftsman would take a sharp quartz stone and methodically apply hundreds of small, precise strikes across the entire working surface. This process raised clouds of fine stone dust, so it was always performed right at the entrance to the dwelling for better ventilation. Weaving tools such as long wooden combs and thin shuttles required special care during manufacture. They had to be absolutely smooth so as not to snag or tear the thin plant fibers during the strenuous work at the loom. These items were polished using bundles of stiff dry grass and the finest clay dust for many hours. Every movement of the craftsman was calibrated to the millimeter, as the slightest unevenness could ruin the entire process of creating a complex carpet pattern. Woven straps for carrying heavy loads were made by intricately interweaving dozens of the finest plant-based threads. These wide strips of fabric were designed to evenly distribute the weight of a travel basket across a person's forehead or shoulders without cutting into the skin. The tension of each thread in such a strap was strictly controlled so that the finished product would not deform under heavy loads. The patterns on these straps were simple yet incredibly elegant, highlighting the functional beauty of every everyday household item. Caring for these tools was a daily habit that left no room for carelessness or neglect. After each use, wooden items were wiped dry and coated with a drop of vegetable oil to prevent the wood from cracking. Wooden spoons and bowls were carved from soft layers of juniper using freshly chipped flint knives, then polished with river sand to a mirror-like shine. All this painstaking handwork required incredible patience, precision of movement, and a deep understanding of the physical properties of each natural material. What large companies engaged in modern interior design keep hidden was already the norm in traditional round dwellings thousands of years ago. The interior space of a Hogan was strictly divided into invisible sectors, each of which had its own specific purpose and deep practical meaning. Movement within the house always followed the path of the sun, from sunrise to sunset, to avoid collisions in the confined space. The south side of the house was traditionally reserved for storing kitchenware, food supplies, and all tools related to food preparation. Upon entering the dwelling through the eastern door, One always turned left, moving in a wide, unseen arc along the curved wall. This rule of circular movement was strictly observed by everyone, eliminating the possibility of chaos in the cramped space filled with baskets and wooden structures. The southern sector, flooded with light in the morning, was the ideal place for grinding corn on heavy stone millstones. Here, on special wooden shelves, clean clay pots, large water jugs, and bundles of dried medicinal herbs were arranged. The western side of the Hogan, located directly opposite the entrance, was considered the most honorable and peaceful place in the entire circular room. This space was intended for rest, deep reflection, and receiving honored guests, who were offered the softest and warmest woven mats. The central area around the hearth was a communal space where all the invisible boundaries between sectors intersected and social life took place. It was a place of unity, where people sat in a circle as equals, warming themselves by the heat of a single fire and sharing an evening meal. The boundary between the private space of the sectors and the communal hearth area was informal, yet intuitively understood by every resident of the house. No one stepped over the outstretched legs of a person sitting by the fire. They always walked around them from behind, observing the rules of respectful behavior. The allocation of sleeping places for the night also followed strict spatial rules based on ancient traditions of respect and safety. The warmer spots closest to the hearth were usually given to those who needed the most warmth after an exhausting day in the cold air. Sleeping mats were spread out in a fan shape from the center toward the walls, forming a perfect circle that mirrored the architectural form of the earthen dome itself. In the morning, all bedding was neatly rolled into tight bundles and stored close to the wooden walls, clearing the center of the room. Small items were stored using a system of wooden pegs driven into the massive logs of the supporting frame at varying heights. Woven bags, small baskets containing flint knives, and bundles of spare belts woven from plant fibers hung from these pegs. The limited space dictated minimalism in everything, from the amount of tableware to the volume of raw materials stored for the winter. The presence of unnecessary items not used daily was considered an impermissible luxury that hindered free movement around the circle. This forced minimalism fostered a particular mindset where the value of an object was determined solely by its functionality and reliability in daily life. The space of the Hogan was a perfect reflection of a rational approach to organizing life in a harsh, natural environment. The northern part of the dwelling was used to store men's tools, weaving materials, and supplies of valuable herbal medicines in woven baskets. The western side, located directly opposite the eastern entrance, was considered the most honorable place in the house, intended for deep reflection and rest. This zoning allowed for perfect order to be maintained even when a blinding snowstorm raged outside, trapping people within four walls. Would you like to live in a house where every movement is strictly regulated by ancient traditions? And are you ready to learn about the struggle against snow in the next chapter? When a powerful winter storm hit the valley, the top priority was to keep oxygen flowing freely through the central chimney. Snow quickly piled up on the gently sloping earthen roof, threatening to block the smoke outlet and disrupt the home's vital ventilation. To clear the vent, long, sturdy poles made from young pine trunks were used to carefully push the heavy layers of wet snow downward. This work required great care to avoid accidentally damaging the protective layer of icy clay plaster on the dome's surface. The howling north wind had piled up gigantic drifts on the leeward side of the Hogan, threatening to completely block the wooden eastern door. Clearing the doorway was a physically exhausting process that had to be repeated every few hours during the prolonged three-day blizzard. Wide shovels, skillfully carved from solid pieces of soft poplar, cut into the dense packed snow, flinging it several meters to the side. A deep snow trench formed around the entrance, its high walls serving as additional protection from the piercing, icy draft. Severe pressure drops during the storm caused smoke from the hearth to occasionally sink downward, filling the room with an acrid, bluish fog. At such moments, they had to temporarily open the entrance door, creating an artificial draft to quickly ventilate the cramped circular space. This procedure led to an instant loss of precious heat, so it was performed in a flash, forcing people to wrap themselves more tightly in woven blankets. After ventilating, the driest and most resinous pine branches were tossed into the fire to restore a comfortable indoor temperature as quickly as possible. The weight of the drifted snow exerted tremendous pressure on the dwelling's wooden frame, testing the strength of every joint in the interwoven logs. Inside, one could clearly hear the massive juniper trunks creaking quietly under the weight of the growing white cap on the roof. This structural strain did not cause panic, as the dome's engineering had been designed from the outset to withstand extreme static and dynamic loads. The elasticity of the log vault allowed the building to deform slightly, redistributing the weight of the snow onto the powerful vertical supports and the stone foundation. The weather was monitored continuously through a narrow chimney opening, which served as the only window to the raging world of the elements outside. The color of the clouds, the direction of the falling snowflakes, and the sound of the wind in the branches of distant trees allowed them to predict the duration of the storm with incredible accuracy. The silence that followed days of howling winds seemed deafening and brought a long-awaited sense of relief to all the shelter's inhabitants. The air outside became crystal clear and bitingly cold, causing the vapor from their breath to instantly turn into tiny ice crystals. Despite the frost, people went outside to stretch their stiff muscles and assess the extent of the damage wrought by the storm around their home. The blinding sun reflected off the endless blanket of snow, transforming the valley into a sparkling sea of dazzling white light. The area in front of the east entrance had to be regularly cleared of snowdrifts using wide wooden shovels carved from solid pieces of poplar. The wall of snow around the door gradually grew to chest height, creating an additional barrier against the piercing, icy wind blowing from the northern plains. Stiff brooms, bound from bundles of wormwood, were constantly used to sweep away the fine, prickly snow that seeped through the door cracks during blizzards. This ceaseless struggle against the encroaching elements turned into a daily, exhausting routine upon which the well-being of the entire isolated family depended. The time of forced inactivity due to bad weather was actively used to create intricate woven baskets, which were of immense importance in daily life. Long, stiff yucca leaves were gathered in the still warm autumn, carefully dried on flat stones, and stored in tight bundles under the Hogan ceiling. Before beginning work, these dry fibers were soaked in water for several hours to restore their natural flexibility and elasticity. The artisan used a sharp awl made from a sturdy tree root to pierce holes in the tightly twisted base of the basket, through which connecting threads were threaded. The beginning of the weaving was the most difficult stage, requiring the creation of a tight and perfectly round center that served as the foundation for the entire piece. The damp plant fibers were wrapped around a stiff core made of a bundle of dry grass, gradually increasing the diameter of the future basket in a spiral. Each new coil was tightly pulled against the previous one, using a thin thread, which was forcefully threaded through holes pierced with an awl. This process required considerable physical effort from the hands to ensure the necessary density and rigidity of the walls of the forming vessel. The pattern on the basket was never a closed circle. A small, invisible gap was always left in the design, called the exit for the spirit. This thin strip of light fibers amid the dark ornamentation symbolized the incompleteness of life's journey and the freedom of the master's creative thought. Completing the work with a perfectly aligned pattern was considered a bad omen, so each item bore a slight, intentional asymmetry. This philosophical concept of weaving was deeply rooted in the people's worldview, reflecting their understanding of the imperfection and changeability of the surrounding world. The process of waterproofing deep water baskets was a separate technological stage requiring the use of heated pine resin. The inner surface of the tightly woven container was generously coated with a hot, sticky mass that penetrated the tiniest gaps between the plant fibers. Then red-hot, round stones were poured inside, which quickly rolled along the walls, causing the resin to melt evenly and soak into the yucca fiber structure. Once hardened, such a basket became completely waterproof, lightweight, and resistant to mechanical damage when dropped onto hard stone. These baskets had an incredibly wide range of uses in daily life, replacing virtually all heavy and fragile clay utensils. They were used to carry harvested nuts, store dried herb roots, sift cornmeal, and serve prepared food at communal meals. The lightness of woven items made them indispensable during long treks, when every extra kilogram of weight was critical. Even when the bottom of a basket was badly worn, it wasn't thrown away but carefully repaired with new fibers, extending its useful life for many years. The scent of freshly woven, damp yucca and tart pine resin lingered for a long time in the air of the cramped room, mingling with the smoke from the hearth. This aroma was an integral part of the winter atmosphere, testifying to the continuous process of creation even during the harshest climatic periods. The master's hands, covered in fine scratches and ingrained resin, were the primary tool that transformed the stiff leaves into elegant works of art. Each finished basket was a symbol of the triumph of human patience and the ability to make use of the modest gifts of the barren desert landscape. The process of dyeing the finished plant fibers required precise adherence to proportions when mixing crushed charcoal and yellow ochre. The baskets were woven so tightly that after brief exposure to water, the fibers expanded and the containers became completely waterproof. The finished products were used not only for storing bulk goods, but also for transporting water from frozen springs to a warm hearth. Every bend and every knot in these baskets held the warmth of human hands and demonstrated incredible skill in working with rough, natural materials. Maintaining vitality and physical strength in the bitter cold required deep knowledge of the properties of local wild plants. Dried branches of mountain wormwood and cedar needles were stored in special woven pouches, hung on wooden pegs along the walls of the dwelling. To prepare a strong and aromatic infusion, the leaves were carefully crushed with a smooth stone and poured into boiling water over the central fire. Steam from the hot drink rose upward, filling the confined space of the Hogan with the thick scent of resin and the tart essential oils of the desert. These valuable herbs were harvested exclusively at the end of the dry summer, when the leaves were most saturated with beneficial essential oils under the scorching sun. The plants were carefully cut with stone knives so as not to damage the root system and allow the shrubs to recover by the following year. Pinyon pine resin was used to create thick, scorching decoctions that had a powerful warming effect on the coldest nights. Pieces of transparent, amber-like resin were tossed directly into boiling water, where they slowly dissolved, giving the water an incredibly thick consistency. The taste of this drink was extremely bitter, so it was consumed in small quantities solely to maintain inner energy and endurance. The scent of this resinous brew instantly cleared the breath and invigorated the nervous system, weary from the monotony of winter confinement. Crushed wild ephedra roots were used with extreme caution, as they had a very powerful stimulating effect on the body. This powder was added to hot water only in moments of extreme physical exhaustion, when heavy work was required to clear massive snowdrifts. A strictly calibrated dosage provided a surge of energy and focus, without causing unwanted effects on the heart rate. Knowing the correct proportions was a true art, passed down only within the family over many generations. Therefore, boiling water and mixing the ingredients always took place in absolute silence, with a sense of deep gratitude toward the harsh nature of the Southwest. This meditative process helped structure time and brought a sense of rhythm to the endless succession of identical snowy days. The used herb remnants were never simply thrown away. They were carefully gathered and burned in the central hearth of the Hogan. The ashes from these herbs were mixed with ordinary wood ash and subsequently used to treat cornmeal, closing the natural cycle. Such waste-free use of plant resources was a vital necessity in conditions where every gram of supplies was of immense value. A deep understanding of the interconnection of all elements of the ecosystem allowed people to coexist harmoniously with nature without depleting its scarce resources. The scents of various brewed herbs served as a kind of calendar, marking the changing of the day or specific stages of the long winter hibernation. The morning air was filled with the invigorating aroma of resin and ephedra, while in the evening the space was filled with the soothing sense of wormwood and sweet wild tea. This olfactory symphony was an integral part of the sensory perception of the surrounding world for people confined to a dark earthen space. The sense of nature were the invisible thread that connected the inhabitants of the Hogan to the boundless expanses of snow-covered plains. Storing these precious supplies required maintaining perfect dryness, so the pouches of herbs were always hung as close as possible to the warm hearth. Regular consumption of such fiery herbal decoctions helped them easily endure sudden temperature changes and long periods spent in the confined earthen space. Being in a confined space during a snowstorm lasting several days required not only physical, but also tremendous mental endurance. To avoid despondency and depression, the inhabitants of the Hogan practiced creating intricate temporary patterns out of multicolored sand right on the packed earthen floor. Minerals of various hues, ground into the finest powder, were carefully sifted through the fingers, forming precise symmetrical lines and geometric shapes. This process required absolute silence and incredible concentration, immersing the person in a state of deep calm and focus on the present moment. The creation of the sand painting began strictly from the center and gradually expanded toward the edges, symbolizing the expansion of the universe and the process of creation. The master used natural pigments of red sandstone, yellow clay, white gypsum, and black charcoal, which were stored in special small pouches. Fine streams of colored dust settled onto a perfectly leveled background of clean river sand, forming images of lightning, mountains, and natural phenomena. Errors in drawing the lines were not corrected, as this would have disrupted the natural flow of the painting's creation. Therefore, hand movements were honed to the point of automaticity. Attention to the geometry of the dwelling itself also played a huge role in maintaining people's psychological comfort under conditions of isolation. The octagonal shape of the Hogan, devoid of sharp internal corners, created a sense of a safe, enveloping space, similar to a natural cave. The absence of straight lines and sharp shadows helped reduce internal tension, making long stays indoors less exhausting. This intuitive architectural psychology helped avoid conflicts in a confined space, smoothing out the rough edges of human interaction. Maintaining absolute order in the arrangement of objects was not only a matter of convenience, but also a means of controlling the surrounding reality. Knowing that every item, whether a flint knife or a woven basket, was strictly in its place, provided a sense of confidence and security. This strict minimalism eliminated visual clutter, allowing the eyes to rest on the smooth surfaces of the earthen walls and polished wooden supports. The orderliness of daily life was the main weapon against the chaos of the raging winter elements, which sought to penetrate this closed-off little world. The quiet, long evenings were often devoted to watching the play of the flames in the central hearth, which served as a substitute for any other form of visual relaxation. The changing color of the coals, from bright yellow to a deep velvety red, was perceived as a slow, mesmerizing spectacle created by nature itself. The heat emanating from the fire was perceived not merely as a physical phenomenon, but as a manifestation of the life force sustaining all living things. This profound philosophical connection with fire formed the foundation of a worldview in which the elements were seen as equal partners, not hostile forces. Upon completion of this painstaking, hours-long work, the sand painting was ruthlessly swept away with a wormwood broom and carried outside the dwelling. This gesture symbolized the constant renewal of the world and the impossibility of holding on to material things, emphasizing the importance of the creative process itself rather than the final result. Long winter evenings were also filled with quiet reflection and watching the flickering embers, which helped to organize thoughts and maintain clarity of mind. It was precisely this deep understanding of the harmony between one's inner state and the raging external elements that allowed people to survive in the harshest conditions. The traditional winter Hogan is not merely a primitive shelter made of mud and logs, but a true masterpiece of engineering and ecological thought. Every detail of this structure, from the angle of the roof to the composition of the earthen plaster, embodies millennia of knowledge about the laws of nature. These technologies prove that complex modern materials or powerful energy sources aren't always necessary for comfortable survival in extreme climates. What topics related to indigenous peoples' survival in extreme conditions would you like to see in future videos? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.